I just came back from a trip. I was gone for about 11 days. Which for me, that was pretty long. For those that take a holiday for 1 or 2 months at a time, I don't know how you do it. On my way back, I had to wake up at 3 in the morning to catch a 5:30 a.m. flight back to New York from California. After getting boarded and strapped in, the pilot announced that the plane was too heavy. We had to wait for either the winds to be in our favor or something about asking permission from the control tower when they open at 6 a.m. For some context, I was flying out of a small regional airport. It's one of those airports that only has 1 baggage claim and maybe 4 or 5 gates. But already my morning was not starting out so well. But even with the delay, I arrived at my layover on time. I had 2 hours to kill, which was perfect. I got to grab a burger from Shake Shack and my once-a-year PSL from Starbucks. Then, the weather got in the way and flights were delayed or canceled all across the Northeast. My 2-hour layover became 4 hours. By the time I landed in New York, I was super exhausted and very hungry. I immediately got a burrito to go from the airport and made my way to baggage claim. And mind you, my luggage ended up at another carousel than the one the airport was telling the passengers to go to. LaGuardia was not on top of its game that night. So after a long day, I didn't want to think about transporting myself from airport to home. I just wanted to be home, eat my burrito, take a shower, and be with my cats. So I took a cab ride home. And that cab ride made me think of this idea of a car-optional life. On this channel, we talk about promoting public transit and using it as much as we can. In a city like New York, when someone opts to not own a car, it doesn't mean an all-or-nothing choice when it comes to using public transit. It doesn't mean that a person is relinquishing the use of a car, but rather to not own a car is to change one's perception on how to use a car. And that's what I want to talk about today, the idea of a car-optional life in a car-optional city. If you're new to this channel, my name is Thea and you're watching Urban Caffeine, a channel that highlights urbanism by talking about the nuances of living in an urban city. If this topic interests you, make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell turned on. And while you're at it, make sure to hit that like button. By no means is New York a car-free city. It's a car-optional city. You can take all sorts of public transit. There are subways, buses, ferries, and even a tram. But cabs are there if you want a private ride, so are Ubers and Lyfts, and even car ownership is viable. But car-free places in the US do exist. If you know of or have ever been to Mackinac Island in Michigan, please comment down below. It's one of those car-free places in the US, but on top of just biking or walking around, people also use horses and buggies. But while these car-free areas in the United States do exist, they are far and few in between. That's because switching to a car-free city is a huge cultural shift. It's asking an entire population to change their mindset on car use in general. The middle ground is a car-optional city. While many urbanists dream of this, sometimes we have to get to here first before getting here. And other times we might not ever get to here, at least not in the near future. So we just stay here, which is where New York falls. But as robust as public transit is in New York, the city and its current infrastructure still excludes a portion of society from fully participating. I used to have a frail 90-year-old gray aunt. There was no way I would have taken her on the New York subway. Even if accessibility was good with proper elevators and decent ramps, culturally, people here are too fast-paced and hurried. She would be way overwhelmed and hyperstimulated, which has its effects. So it's not just a matter of having good infrastructure for public transit and good urban planning, it's also a matter of culture. While good infrastructure and good urban design can help shape culture, as far as my lifetime goes, I don't think New York or even just Manhattan will ever become a car-free city. I mean, we can't even make the subway 100% accessible. The goal of the MTA is 95% accessibility by 2025. That's 32 years from now. So maybe when it's my turn to be in a walker, I might still be able to use the New York subway. As I live in a car-optional city, I myself, being able-bodied, having no kids, would probably label myself as a 90-10 when it comes to transportation. By that, I mean when it comes to getting around, 90% of the time I take mass transit, and 10% of the time I take a private ride. An example of that 10% of the time when I take a Lyft, Uber, or yellow cab is when it's really late and the subway is running every 30 minutes. Or I have a lot of things to carry and it's difficult to go up and down the stairs of a subway. Many people in New York fall in this 90-10 category. Most people will go to and from work daily, which is the bulk of their transit needs. That other 10% is when maybe they're going to a formal event and don't want to be wearing a suit or formal dress on the subway, or they're feeling ill, or they're hauling 4 suitcases. As lifestyle changes, so do needs. This 90-10 could change over a person's lifetime, especially when people have kids, and also when kids have grown up. I'm not saying that this is the template for everyone living in New York. The point is that everyone lives different lives with different needs. And despite living different lives with different needs, not all of a person's transit needs require a car. Sometimes a person takes mass transit, sometimes a person takes private ride. They have the option. So how can we get here? So the majority of people in our society are able-bodied. They can walk, climb stairs, and stand for a decent amount of time. If we can take the majority of our population, the able-bodied portion, to take mass transit or alternative transit, we wouldn't have to widen roads and destroy blocks of cities to create space for parking and more roads. This will keep streets at a not-so-scary size so that people are comfortable walking alongside it and crossing it. The problem is people love driving and having the convenience of a private ride all the time. So how can we change this? You might have seen this video.
You take the subway a lot.
Took it all day yesterday.
No, stop it. This is crazy to me. A subway. What are you proving here? I mean, this
I'm not proving anything.
What are you doing? Why would you do that?
If you look at Google Maps and you put in your address, I'm saying 99% of the time, the fastest way to get there is the train. It's just the truth.
You're not petrified down there?
Oh, God, no.
There's something to be said when Sarah Jessica Parker, the star of Sex and the City, a cosmopolitan queen, prefers taking a subway over a car. The idea is for public transit to give someone something so valuable to them that they will forgo taking a car. And to Sarah Jessica Parker, it's time. She will forgo taking a car because it's faster to take a subway. Time is one thing that's valuable, and the other thing is money. You will save a lot of money by taking public transit. A subway is less than $3 a ride. A cab ride starts at $3. With proper infrastructure, walking or mass transit can become attractive even though there's the option to use a car. But most of the infrastructure in the US discourages walking, biking, and mass transit. Towns and cities are built without bike lanes and in some cases without sidewalks. Have you ever tried crossing one of those hybrids between a street and a road? Oftentimes they're called stroads. I was in a typical mid-sized American city once and had to cross one of those. It's like crossing a third of a football field with a time limit. Some places don't even have pedestrian lines or walk signs. You just kind of have to find an opening between these speeding vehicles and full-on sprint to the other side. Yes, you have to sprint because cars will be coming at you at 50 miles an hour. Super dangerous. I do not recommend it. Which brings us to road diets. A lot of road and street diets are happening here and there in New York, and if you live in a city that's experiencing road diets, comment down below. This is when a road or street is slimmed down by taking away a lane or more to accommodate alternative modes of transportation. Depending on how much space is left when that lane is taken away, the city can provide a protected bike lane, maybe widen the pedestrian sidewalk, maybe provide a protected bus lane, or any of these combinations. A road diet discourages a person from driving if they don't really need to because there's not much room for driving. But the lane is still there as passage for those that have to take a private ride. The idea is, yes, it may take more time for a driver to circumvent the narrow streets or closed off streets, but that time becomes the price for someone who really needs to be in a private vehicle. It's enough of an inconvenience for most people to forgo a car while making biking and walking more attractive. Aside from creating proper infrastructure for pedestrians and strap hangers, fees for those that use a car is also another method to leading people to use public transit. But honestly, I think those with disabilities or medical waivers shouldn't have to pay for things like congestion fees. In New York, congestion fees are being discussed for privately owned vehicles, but we already have them for other vehicles like taxis and other for-hire vehicles. So there are congestion fees and toll fees to discourage unnecessary car travel, but there are also parking fees. Those who I know that occasionally drive to work pay anywhere from $20 to $40 a day on parking in the city, which is a waste since the subway is only $3. And on top of that, they also have to pay for toll and gas. So if convenience and saving time isn't enough to convince someone to take public transit, maybe saving money is worth considering. There's a revolution happening on getting more cars off the roads by changing zoning laws and improving public transit. I'm hoping that we can get more car-optional cities and less car-necessary ones. In the United States, I honestly think that cars will always be around, but that doesn't mean that cars have to be a necessity. The idea is to change people's perspective on how cars should be used. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know, are you a 90-10 like me, or do you have different percentages? Comment down below. And if you're interested in chatting about urbanism and public transit with like-minded people, you might want to consider gaining access to the Urban Caffeine Discord community by joining Patreon or YouTube membership. No matter what tier you join, everybody gets access to the Urban Caffeine Discord community. So check that out at patreon.com/urbancaffeine or the join button of this channel. With that, thank you so much for watching, and until the next video, happy New Yorking!